My sister-in-law convinced the family to exclude me from the will reading. She's not blood, she argued. I agreed completely and stayed home. After the reading, the lawyer made a phone call. That changed everything. The casket lowered into the ground, and I watched Denise lean over to whisper something to Robert's younger brother. Whatever she said made him nod and glance at me with fresh disgust. There I was, 23 years of marriage reduced to nothing more than an inconvenience at my own husband's funeral. She doesn't belong here, Denise had said earlier, loud enough for the entire first row to hear. Robert would want his real family to handle things properly. I adjusted my black dress, the one Robert had bought me for our anniversary dinner just 6 months ago. Back then he'd kissed my cheek and said I looked beautiful. Now that same dress felt like armor that wasn't quite thick enough to protect me from the arrows his family kept shooting my way. Before we continue, I want to thank you for joining me in sharing these stories of family betrayal and quiet strife. If you believe women deserve respect regardless of blood relations, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps us reach more women who need to hear this. Now let's see what that lawyer's phone call revealed. The funeral director approached me afterward, clipboard in hand. Mrs. Patterson, there are some final arrangements to discuss. Oh, she won't be handling those, Denise interrupted, stepping between us like a guard dog. The family will take care of everything from here. I opened my mouth to protest, but the director looked confused, glancing between us. Denise's smile was all teeth and no warmth. Laura dear, you've been through enough stress. Let us handle the business side of things. That's when I realized Robert's death hadn't just made me a widow. It had made me invisible. The next few weeks passed in a blur of Denise treating Robert's house like her personal headquarters. She'd arrive each morning with her designer coffee and clipboard, announcing her plans to organize everything properly. I'd stopped going over after the third day when I found her going through Robert's personal papers at the kitchen table. These financial documents are so complicated, she'd said without looking up. Good thing Robert had family who understands these things. I'd stood in the doorway of what used to be my second home, watching this woman reorganize my husband's life like I'd never existed. The worst part wasn't her cruelty, it was how natural she made it look. The brunches started the following week. Denise would invite Robert's cousins, his golfing buddies, even neighbors I'd known for years. I'd drive by sometimes and see cars packed in the driveway, hear laughter floating from the windows. Once, I saw Mrs. Henderson from next door carrying a casserole dish up the front steps. The same woman who used to borrow sugar from me and chat about her grandchildren. "How are you holding up, dear?" she'd asked when I ran into her at the grocery store. "I'm managing," I'd replied, waiting for her to mention seeing me around the house or ask about the gatherings. Instead, she'd patted my arm and said, "Denise mentioned you've been keeping to yourself. Probably for the best during this difficult time." That night, I sat in my small apartment, the place Robert and I had planned to sell once we retired, and tried to remember the last time I'd felt like I belonged anywhere. Even during our marriage, family gatherings had always felt like performances where I never quite knew my lines. Robert had sensed it, of course. He'd squeeze my hand under the dinner table when his sister made one of her pointed comments about outsiders, or people who married into the family. Afterward, he'd always apologize. "Don't let her get to you, Laura," he'd say, pulling me close. "You're my wife. That's all that matters." But now Robert was gone and his protection had died with him. The call about the will reading came on a Tuesday. I was watering the small herb garden on my balcony when my phone rang. Denise's name flashed on the screen and I almost didn't answer. "Laura, sweetie," her voice dripped false concern. "I wanted to give you a heads up about Friday's will reading." My hand tightened around the phone. "What about it?" "Well, Mr. Hastings will be meeting with the family to go over Robert's final wishes. You know how these legal things can be, very formal, very focused on blood relatives and estate matters." I set down my watering can. "Robert was my husband, Denise. Of course he was, dear. But these readings are really about inheritance and family assets. Since you're not technically blood family, and you have your own apartment and everything, Mr. Hastings thought it might be less awkward for everyone if we handled the formal proceedings first." The words hung in the air between us. Less awkward for everyone. Meaning less awkward for them. "I see," I managed. "I knew you'd understand. You've always been so considerate about family boundaries. Robert used to say how much he appreciated that about you, how you never tried to insert yourself where you didn't belong." After she hung up, I sat on my tiny balcony until the sun set. 23 years of marriage, and I was being told I didn't belong at my own husband's will reading. The terrible part was how easily I accepted it. How familiar that feeling of exclusion had become. I thought about Robert's last weeks, how he'd grown quieter but somehow more intentional with his words. He'd hold my hand longer, kiss my forehead more often, and sometimes I'd catch him watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Laura," he'd said one evening while we watched television, "promise me something. Anything. Don't let them make you feel small after I'm gone. You're stronger than you know." At the time I'd assumed he was talking about grief. Now I wondered if he'd seen this coming. If he'd known his family would try to erase me the moment he couldn't protect me anymore. Friday morning arrived gray and drizzly. I made coffee and sat by my window, imagining them all gathered in Mr. Hastings' office. Denise would be there early, probably in one of her expensive suits, acting like the grieving sister while positioning herself as the responsible one. Robert's brother would nod along with whatever she said, and the cousins would sit quietly hoping for their small shares. And I would be here in my apartment, excluded from the final chapter of my husband's story. But as I sat there sipping coffee from the mug Robert had given me last Christmas, something shifted inside me. For the first time since his death, I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry. I was just tired of being small. Maybe it was time to stop apologizing for taking up space in a family that had never wanted me anyway. Maybe Robert's final gift wouldn't be money or property. Maybe it would be the permission to finally stop trying to belong where I wasn't wanted. I had no idea that across town in a lawyer's office I'd never seen, everything I thought I knew about my place in this family was about to change forever. Sunday afternoon found me organizing Robert's old photo albums, something I'd been avoiding for weeks. The silence in my apartment felt heavier than usual when my phone started ringing. The caller ID showed a number I recognized but hadn't expected to see. Mr. Hastings, Robert's attorney. "Mrs. Patterson, I apologize for calling on the weekend, but there's been a significant misunderstanding that needs immediate clarification." His voice carried an urgency that made me set down the photo I'd been holding. Robert and me at Niagara Falls, both of us laughing at something I couldn't remember anymore. "What kind of misunderstanding, Mr. Hastings?" "Laura, you are the sole beneficiary of Robert's entire estate. Everything, the house, the investment accounts, the life insurance policies, the business assets, all of it has been left to you." The words didn't register at first. I found myself staring at the wall, processing each syllable like they were spoken in a foreign language. "That can't be right," I whispered. "Denise said the family." "Mrs. Patterson, I need you to understand something very clearly. There is no inheritance for Robert's siblings or extended family. The will is explicit and legally airtight. You inherit everything." My legs gave out and I sank onto my couch. The photo album tumbled to the floor, pictures scattering across the carpet like fallen leaves. But why didn't he tell me? In 23 years he never mentioned. Mr. Hastings' voice softened. "Robert came to see me 3 months before he passed. He said he wanted to surprise you, but more than that, he was concerned about his family's reaction. He specifically mentioned that he feared they would make things more difficult for you if they knew the contents of the will beforehand." The room started spinning. Robert had known. He'd seen what I'd been too polite to acknowledge, that his family had been waiting for him to die so they could finally push me out completely. "Mrs. Patterson, are you still there?" "Yes, I'm here. I don't understand. What happened at Friday's reading?" "That's where the situation becomes rather complicated. Mrs. Denise Morrison contacted my office last week and informed my secretary that you had decided not to attend due to grief. She said you'd asked the family to handle everything on your behalf." My mouth went dry. "She said what?" "When I attempted to call you Friday morning to confirm this arrangement, Mrs. Morrison intercepted the call. She assured me she was acting as your representative and that you preferred to receive the information secondhand to avoid additional emotional distress." I stood up so quickly that black spots danced across my vision. "Mr. Hastings, I never said any of those things. Denise told me I wasn't welcome because I wasn't blood family." The silence on his end stretched longer than comfortable. When he spoke again, his professional tone had shifted into something much more serious. "Mrs. Patterson, I believe we need to discuss the events of Friday's meeting in detail. Mrs. Morrison and the other family members left my office under the impression that they had inherited various portions of the estate. This was based entirely on their assumption that you had voluntarily removed yourself from consideration. My hands started trembling so violently that I almost dropped the phone. They think they inherited Robert's estate? Unfortunately, yes. And Mrs. Patterson, there's something else you need to know. Mrs. Morrison has already begun making financial commitments based on this misunderstanding. The next hour passed in a blur of legal explanations and procedural details. Mr. Hastings explained that Denise had immediately contacted contractors about renovating the house. She'd scheduled appointments with financial advisors to discuss her new portfolio. She'd even started the process of transferring the utilities into her name. Can she do that legally? I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. Absolutely not. But the concerning part is how quickly and confidently she's proceeding. It suggests she may have been planning this course of action for some time. After hanging up, I sat in my apartment as afternoon turned to evening, trying to process what I'd learned. Robert hadn't just left me his belongings, he tried to protect me even after death. The man who'd spent years quietly deflecting his family's subtle cruelties had orchestrated one final act of love. My phone buzzed with a Facebook notification. Someone had tagged me in a photo. With shaking fingers, I opened the app and immediately wished I hadn't. There was Denise, glass of champagne raised high, standing in Robert's living room surrounded by his relatives. The caption read, "Celebrating new beginnings and honoring Robert's memory with family dinner in our beautiful inherited home." The comments were worse than the post itself. Robert's cousin Margaret had written, "So happy the house is staying in the family where it belongs." His golfing buddy had added, "Robert would be proud to see his legacy in good hands." I scrolled through photo after photo. Denise posing next to Robert's favorite reading chair, now decorated with new throw pillows. Her teenage daughter sprawled across the couch where Robert and I used to watch movies. Family members I barely recognized toasting their good fortune with wine from Robert's collection. In one photo I could see Robert's study in the background. Someone had already removed his books from the shelves. My phone rang again. "Mr. Hastings. Laura, I wanted to give you a heads up. Mrs. Morrison just called my emergency line. She's asking about probate timelines and when she can expect to take full legal possession of the property." "What did you tell her?" "I told her that all estate matters needed to be discussed with the actual beneficiary during business hours." She seemed quite upset by that response. Something in his tone suggested there was more to the story. "Mr. Hastings, what aren't you telling me? Mrs. Morrison made some rather concerning statements about your mental state and your ability to handle estate matters. She's suggesting that grief has made you unstable, and that the family should petition for guardianship of the assets." The photo album on my floor caught my eye again. Pictures of Robert and me building a life together, traveling, celebrating anniversaries. 23 years of memories that his family was apparently ready to erase along with my legal rights. "What do we do now?" I asked. "Legally, Mrs. Patterson, you have several options. We could contact them immediately and correct the misunderstanding. We could file paperwork to prevent any further unauthorized actions regarding the property. Or, we could allow them to continue under their current assumptions for a brief period while we document their actions. Sometimes, in contested estate situations, it's valuable to have clear evidence of intent and behavior." I walked to my window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere across town, Denise was probably planning her next renovation project with my husband's money. She was celebrating her victory over the woman who'd never belonged, never quite measured up, never deserved a place at the family table. For 23 years I'd tried to earn their acceptance. I'd swallowed insults, ignored slights, and made myself smaller to avoid conflict. I'd let them make me feel like an outsider in my own marriage. But Robert had seen something in me that I'd forgotten existed. He'd trusted me with everything he'd built, everything he'd worked for. His final gift wasn't just money or property. It was proof that I'd been worth something all along. "Mr. Hastings," I said quietly, "let's document everything." The first photo arrived 3 days later. Carol Henderson from next door had always been fond of me, and apparently she'd grown suspicious of the sudden changes happening at Robert's house. Her text message was simple: "Thought you should see this, dear." The image showed a massive dumpster in Robert's driveway, overflowing with furniture I recognized. His grandmother's antique rocking chair sat at the top of the pile, one arm broken off. Below it I could see pieces of the dining room set we'd bought for our 10th anniversary. The one where we'd hosted every Thanksgiving until his family started making excuses not to come. My hands shook as I zoomed in on the photo. There, among the debris, was Robert's leather-bound collection of classic novels. Books he'd read to me on quiet Sunday afternoons, his voice gentle and warm. Now they were scattered like garbage, rain-soaked and ruined. Carol's next message arrived an hour later. The contractors arrived this morning. Denise is having the kitchen completely gutted. That kitchen held 20 years of memories. Robert teaching me to make his mother's apple pie recipe, the two of us dancing between the counter and the stove while dinner cooked. I'd burned so many meals in that kitchen while learning to cook his favorite dishes, and he'd eaten every disaster with a smile. Over the next week, Carol became my unofficial spy. She'd send updates throughout the day, each message more infuriating than the last. Denise had hired a team of decorators from the city, expensive ones judging by their luxury cars parked outside. She'd scheduled wine tastings in the evenings, transforming Robert's quiet study into what she called an entertainment space. "She's telling everyone she's always had wonderful taste," Carol texted. "Says Robert never knew how to properly decorate a home." The most painful message came on a Thursday evening. Carol had taken a photo through the front window during one of Denise's parties. There was my sister-in-law holding court in Robert's favorite armchair, the worn leather recliner where he'd spent countless evenings reading newspapers and watching baseball games. She dressed it up with gaudy gold throw pillows and was gesturing dramatically while a circle of admirers listened to her story. I could practically hear her voice through the photograph, probably telling them how she'd always known this day would come, how she'd been preparing to take care of the family property. The breaking point came when Carol called me directly, her voice tight with anger. "Laura, honey, I can't just text you about this one. Denise just told the mailman that you and Robert were having marriage problems before he died. She said you'd already moved out and that's why you're not living in the house." My coffee mug slipped from my fingers, shattering against my kitchen floor. "She said what?" "She's rewriting history, dear. She told Mrs. Peterson from the corner house that you never really loved Robert, that you were only interested in his money. But when he got sick you supposedly couldn't handle it and abandoned him." The cruelty of it took my breath away. Robert's final months had been the most precious time we'd shared. When the diagnosis came, I'd taken leave from work to care for him. I'd driven him to every appointment, held his hand through every treatment, slept in a chair beside his hospital bed. "There's more," Carol continued. "She's contacted a real estate agent about selling the house. I saw the woman measuring the front yard yesterday. That evening I couldn't resist driving by. I parked across the street under the old oak tree where Robert and I used to sit during neighborhood barbecues. The house looked different, too bright, too perfect. Denise had installed new outdoor lighting that turned the familiar facade into something alien. Through the living room window I could see exactly what Carol had described. 3 people in expensive suits sat around the coffee table, papers spread between them. Denise gestured excitedly while pointing toward different rooms. One of the suited figures held up a tablet, probably showing her market comparisons. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. When I opened it, my blood ran cold. "Laura, this is Janet Morrison, Denise's daughter. Mom wanted me to reach out about Dad's old tools in the garage. She's donating them to charity next week unless you want to pick them up. She doesn't think they have much sentimental value, but wanted to give you the chance to take them if you're interested." Robert's tools. He'd spent every Saturday morning in that garage restoring furniture and building birdhouses for our backyard. Those tools had been his father's before him, passed down through 3 generations. Denise knew exactly how much they meant. She'd complained about them taking up space for years. I typed back quickly, "Yes, I'd like to get them. When would be convenient? Actually, Mom says it might be easier if you just let us handle the donation. She's worried it might be too emotional for you to go through his things right now. We'll make sure they go to someone who can really use them." The calculated coldness of it made me dizzy. She was giving me the illusion of choice while making it clear that my answer didn't matter. Janet was following her mother's script perfectly, concerned and considerate on the surface, dismissive underneath. The next morning Mr. Hastings called with his daily update. "She's accelerated her timeline considerably," he said. Yesterday she contacted 3 different real estate agencies asking for market evaluations. She's also opened consultation meetings with financial advisors about optimizing her new portfolio. Can we stop the house sale? Legally, she has no authority to sell anything. But Laura, I'm more concerned about what happens when these businesses start requesting documentation she can't provide. The situation is going to unravel quickly, and when it does, she's going to look for someone to blame. That afternoon, I received a package in the mail. Inside was a single photograph, one I'd never seen before. It showed Robert and me at last year's church picnic, his arm around my waist, both of us laughing at something happening off camera. On the back, someone had written in Robert's handwriting, "For my Laura, the strongest woman I know. Never let anyone convince you otherwise." There was no note explaining how the photo had reached me or who had sent it. But somehow, sitting in my quiet apartment with Robert's words in my hands, I felt his presence more clearly than I had since his funeral. My phone rang. Carol again. "Laura, there are moving trucks at the house. Big ones. Denise is having everything else hauled away tomorrow morning." I looked at the photograph again, at Robert's proud smile, at the way his hand rested protectively on my back. 4 weeks I'd been gathering evidence and building legal cases, but somewhere in the process I'd forgotten the most important thing. This wasn't just about money or property. This was about defending the life Robert and I had built together. This was about making sure that 23 years of love wouldn't be erased by a woman who'd never understood what we meant to each other. Tomorrow the documenting phase would end. Tomorrow, it would be time for Denise to learn exactly who she'd been underestimating all along. The first sign of trouble came on a Tuesday morning when my phone rang with an unknown number. The voice on the other end was professional but strained. "Mrs. Patterson? This is Marcus Chun from Elite Interior Design. I'm calling about the renovation project at 1247 Maple Street. There seems to be some confusion about payment authorization." I gripped the phone tighter. What kind of confusion? Well, Mrs. Morrison hired us 3 weeks ago for a complete kitchen and living room redesign. The initial payment cleared, but yesterday her bank declined our second invoice. When we called, she became quite agitated and suggested we contact you about alternative payment arrangements. The audacity took my breath away. "Mr. Chin, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I haven't authorized any renovations and I'm not responsible for Mrs. Morrison's financial commitments." His silence stretched uncomfortably. "Mrs. Patterson, are you saying you're not aware of the $30,000 renovation currently underway at your property?" "That's exactly what I'm saying." After hanging up, I immediately called Mr. Hastings. His reaction was swift and decisive. "This is perfect documentation of unauthorized financial decisions," he said. "I'm filing emergency injunctions today to prevent any further property alterations or sales attempts." By Thursday, the situation had escalated dramatically. Carol texted me a photo of Denise standing in the driveway, gesticulating wildly at 2 men in work clothes who were loading their tools back into a truck. "The contractors just left," Carol's message read. "They looked pretty upset." Denise was shouting something about family obligations and legal technicalities. That afternoon my phone buzzed with a call from Janet Morrison. Her voice carried none of the false sweetness from our previous conversation. "Laura, what exactly did you say to the renovation company?" "Mom is absolutely humiliated. They're demanding immediate payment and threatening to put liens on the house." "Janet, I simply told them the truth, that I hadn't authorized any work and wasn't responsible for the bills. But you can't just abandon family obligations like this. Dad would be horrified by how selfish you're being." The manipulation was so blatant it almost made me laugh. "Your father left very specific instructions about his wishes, Janet. Maybe you should ask your mother about those." I hung up before she could respond, but the calls didn't stop. Over the next 2 days, I received increasingly frantic messages from various family members. Robert's brother demanding I stop playing games. His cousin Margaret insisting I do the right thing for the family. Even his old golfing buddy called asking if I'd lost my mind with grief. But the most revealing call came from someone unexpected. Denise's own neighbor, a woman named Patricia whom I'd met briefly at a few family gatherings. "Laura, honey, I hope you don't mind me reaching out directly. I got your number from Carol Henderson. I felt like someone should tell you what's really happening over here. Patricia's voice was hushed, conspiratorial. Denise has been throwing these elaborate dinner parties, telling everyone she's come into this wonderful inheritance. But yesterday I saw her loading jewelry boxes into her car. When I asked if she was going somewhere special, she got all flustered and said she was liquidating some assets for investment purposes. The image of Denise pawning her wedding ring and anniversary gifts to pay for renovations she couldn't afford brought a grim satisfaction. But Patricia wasn't finished. There's something else, Laura. Last night there was quite a scene. Some man in an expensive suit showed up demanding to speak with her about property authorization documents. She kept insisting she had every right to make decisions about family property, but he left looking very frustrated. After Patricia hung up, I sat in my apartment piecing together the timeline. Denise's spending spree had clearly exceeded whatever savings she'd had. She'd committed to renovation costs based on an inheritance that didn't exist, and now the bills were coming due. Mr. Hastings called Friday evening with an update that confirmed my suspicions. The real estate agencies have all withdrawn their services, he reported. Apparently, when they requested proof of ownership for listing purposes, Mrs. Morrison became hostile and accused them of unnecessarily complicating a simple family transaction. Word travels fast in that industry. She's essentially blacklisted herself from working with any reputable agents in the area. But the most damaging revelation came over the weekend. Carol forwarded me a screenshot from the neighborhood social media group, a post that Denise had apparently shared in a moment of desperation. Some people just can't handle other people's success, the post read. When family members get jealous and try to sabotage your rightful inheritance, it really shows their true character. Poor Robert would be so disappointed in how his widow is behaving. #family first #inheritance dispute #some people never change. The comments section was brutal. Neighbors who'd watched Denise's excessive spending and arrogant behavior over the past weeks didn't hesitate to share their observations. Rightful inheritance? Laura was married to Robert for over 20 years. That makes her family too. Maybe if you hadn't been throwing such expensive parties, you wouldn't be having money problems now. I heard you've been telling people Laura abandoned Robert when he was sick. That's not the woman. I remember visiting him every day at the hospital. My phone rang Monday morning with a number I didn't recognize. The voice was shaky, definitely Denise, but stripped of all her usual confidence. Laura, we need to talk. This whole situation has gotten completely out of hand. What situation, Denise? You know exactly what situation. These contractors are calling me constantly, the real estate people won't return my calls, and now everyone in the neighborhood thinks I'm some kind of fraud. Her voice cracked on the last word, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Maybe you should have thought about that before you started spending money that wasn't yours. It should have been mine. The mask slipped completely. I'm his sister. I've been part of this family since birth, not some outsider who showed up and married her way in. Is that what you really think, Denise? That I married Robert for his money? What else would it be? You had nothing when you met him. No family connections, no money, nothing to offer except. She caught herself, but the damage was done. 23 years of resentment had finally found its voice. Except what, Denise? Say it. The silence stretched between us, heavy with decades of unspoken hostility. You don't deserve any of this, she whispered finally. We're the blood family. You're nothing. I ended the call and immediately forwarded the recording to Mr. Hastings. Evidence was mounting, and Denise's desperation was making her careless. Her attempts to rally the family against me had backfired spectacularly. Instead of uniting them, the pressure had exposed every petty grievance and jealousy that had been festering beneath the surface for years. That evening, Carol texted me one final photo. It showed Denise's car in the driveway, packed with boxes and suitcases. The caption read, "Looks like someone's planning an extended vacation." But I knew better. This wasn't a vacation. This was a woman who'd burned through her savings, destroyed her reputation, and painted herself into a corner with nowhere left to turn. The storm I'd been watching gather was finally ready to break. The morning air carried the scent of burning leaves as I walked up the familiar driveway, my heels clicking against the pavement Robert had resealed just 2 summers ago. Mr. Hastings walked beside me, his leather briefcase containing the documents that would change everything. Behind us, a sheriff's deputy followed at a respectful distance. a precaution Mr. Hastings had insisted upon. "You ready for this, Laura?" he asked, adjusting his glasses. I looked at the house where I'd spent the happiest years of my life, now transformed by Denise's gaudy renovations. New shutters in an awful shade of burgundy, pretentious garden sculptures littering the front yard, and that ridiculous chandelier visible through the living room window. I've been ready for weeks. The front door opened before we could knock. Denise appeared, wearing one of her expensive silk blouses and that practiced smile she reserved for people she considered beneath her. Her confidence was remarkable considering the circumstances. Well, look who finally decided to visit. Did you come to apologize for all the trouble you've caused? Mr. Hastings stepped forward. "Mrs. Morrison, I'm here in my capacity as executor of Robert Patterson's estate to deliver these legal documents." She glanced at the papers dismissively. "I don't know what game you think you're playing, but this is family property now. Laura has no claim here." The moment had arrived. I watched her face as Mr. Hastings handed her the first document, a certified copy of Robert's will with my name clearly highlighted as sole beneficiary. Her eyes scanned the page once, twice, then a third time. The color drained from her cheeks like water from a broken dam. "This can't be right," she whispered. "There's been some mistake." "There's no mistake, Mrs. Morrison. Mrs. Patterson is the legal owner of this property and all estate assets. You have 72 hours to vacate the premises." That's when the mask finally shattered. "This is my home." The shriek that erupted from her throat was barely human. "I'm his sister. I'm his blood. She's nobody. She's nothing." Neighbors began appearing on their porches, drawn by the commotion. Carol Henderson stood in her doorway, phone in hand, probably recording everything. Mrs. Peterson from the corner house had stopped watering her flowers to stare. "Denise," I said quietly, "you need to calm down. Don't you dare tell me to calm down. You've stolen everything. You're a thief. A manipulative little thief who wormed her way into my family, and now you think you can just—" "Mrs. Morrison," the deputy interrupted, "I need you to lower your voice and accept these legal documents." But she was beyond reason now. She snatched the eviction notice from Mr. Hastings' hand and tore it in half, the pieces fluttering to the ground like confetti. "You can't make me leave. I've put thousands of dollars into renovating this place. I've made it beautiful. Robert would have wanted me to have it." "Robert left very clear instructions about his wishes," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "And apparently they didn't include you." Her face contorted with rage. "You poisoned him against his own family. You isolated him. You made him forget who really mattered." The accusation stung because it was so completely backwards. Robert had seen his family's true nature long before I'd acknowledged it. He'd spent years protecting me from their subtle cruelties, their constant reminders that I wasn't one of them. Movement caught my eye. Robert's brother Thomas was walking up the driveway, followed by cousin Margaret and several other family members. Denise must have called for reinforcements. "What's going on here?" Thomas demanded, his voice carrying the same entitled tone I remembered from family gatherings. Mr. Hastings efficiently handed copies of the will to each of them. I watched their expressions shift from confusion to disbelief to something much uglier. "This is ridiculous," Margaret sputtered. "Robert wouldn't have cut out his own family. Someone influenced him. Someone manipulated." "Nobody manipulated anyone," I interrupted. "Robert made his own decisions. You turned him against us." Denise screamed, pointing an accusatory finger at me. 23 years of whispering poison in his ear, making him think his own family didn't love him. The irony was breathtaking. These people who'd spent decades making me feel unwelcome were now claiming I'd isolated Robert from their love. By noon the moving trucks had arrived. Professional movers began carrying out boxes of Denise's belongings while she paced the front porch like a caged animal. The expensive renovations she'd commissioned would stay. They'd become my problem now, not hers. "This isn't over," she hissed as I supervised the removal of items that didn't belong to her. "I'll contest this. I'll prove you manipulated him." "Contest away," I replied calmly. "Mr. Hastings has everything properly documented." The most devastating moment came when she realized her financial situation. The renovation bills, the pawned jewelry, the maxed-out credit cards. She'd burned through her savings for nothing. The contractors had already filed liens against the property, which were now my responsibility to resolve. "What about my investments?" she asked Mr. Hastings desperately. "The money I put into improving this place?" "Unauthorized improvements to someone else's property don't create ownership rights, Mrs. Morrison. Any money you spent was your choice and your loss." She collapsed onto the porch steps then, her designer clothes wrinkled, her perfect makeup streaked with tears. For the first time since Robert's funeral, she looked her age. A 60-year-old woman who'd gambled everything on an assumption and lost. The family members who'd gathered to support her began drifting away as the reality set in. Thomas muttered something about legal options, but didn't meet my eyes. Margaret loaded her purse into her car without saying goodbye to Denise. As the sun began to set, only Carol and I remained on the street, watching the last of Denise's belongings disappear into the moving truck. She sat hunched on the porch, staring at nothing. "Denise," I said, approaching her carefully. She looked up with red-rimmed eyes. "What?" "You were right about one thing. I'm not blood family. But Robert and I built something here together. Something you never understood." She wiped her nose with the back of her hand. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means this house was never about the money or the inheritance. It was about love. Real love. The kind that doesn't keep score or demand proof of worthiness." I looked at the house, my house now, with its ridiculous burgundy shutters and pretentious garden sculptures. "You changed everything about this place except the one thing that mattered most. The love Robert and I shared here. That's something you can renovate or steal or destroy." The moving truck pulled away, taking the last remnants of Denise's brief reign. She stood slowly, her legs unsteady, and walked to her packed car without another word. As her taillights disappeared down Maple Street, I felt something shift inside me. The weight of 23 years of trying to prove I belonged somewhere I was never wanted finally lifted from my shoulders. I belonged here not because Roberts will said so, but because I'd chosen to love someone completely, and he'd loved me the same way in return. Standing alone in the driveway as darkness settled over Maple Street, I pulled out my phone and made a call that would surprise everyone, including myself. "Mr. Hastings? It's Laura. I've made a decision about the house and I think you're going to find it interesting." 3 days later, I sat across from him in his office, signing papers that would transform Robert's house into something neither Denise nor I had ever imagined. "The Patterson House for Women in Transition," I said, reading the letterhead aloud. "Robert always believed in helping people who needed a fresh start. This feels right." Mr. Hastings smiled as he notarized the documents. "Your husband would be proud, Laura. This is exactly the kind of gesture he would have made himself." The announcement hit the local newspaper first, then spread to social media with unexpected speed. By Wednesday morning, my phone was ringing constantly with interview requests. The story had apparently touched something deep in people. The widow who inherited everything and chose to give it away rather than live surrounded by painful memories. "Mrs. Patterson, this is Jennifer Walsh from Channel 7 News. We'd love to do a feature story about your incredible donation." I agreed to one interview conducted in my small apartment rather than at the house. Jennifer was a kind woman in her 40s who seemed genuinely moved by the story. "What made you decide to donate rather than sell or move in yourself?" she asked. I looked out my apartment window where I could see children playing in the courtyard below. That house represents 23 years of love between my husband and me. But it also became a symbol of family division and greed. I wanted to turn it into something positive. A place where women who've lost everything can rebuild their lives. The interview aired Friday night during the local news. By Saturday morning, donations were pouring in from across the state. Women's organizations offered support services. Local businesses volunteered supplies and labor. But the most unexpected call came from someone I hadn't heard from in months. "Laura? This is Thomas Morrison, Robert's brother." I gripped the phone, preparing for another confrontation. "I saw the news story," he continued, his voice subdued. "I wanted to apologize. For everything. The way we treated you after Robert died, the way we acted during this whole mess with Denise. It was wrong." The admission caught me off guard. "Thomas, No, let me finish. I've been thinking a lot since yesterday about how Robert talked about you, how he lit up whenever you walked into a room. He saw something in you that the rest of us were too stubborn to recognize. You're turning his house into exactly what he would have wanted. A place of healing." Tears surprised me, rolling down my cheeks before I could stop them. Thank you for saying that. Denise won't admit it, but she knows she was wrong too. The whole family is talking about what you're doing. Some of us want to help if you'll let us. Within 2 weeks, the transformation began. Thomas arrived Saturday morning with a crew of volunteers, including Margaret and several cousins I barely recognized. They spent the day removing Denise's garish renovations, restoring the house to something closer to what Robert and I had created together. The burgundy shutters came down first, replaced with the soft blue Robert had originally chosen. The pretentious garden sculptures disappeared, making room for a practical vegetable garden that residents could tend. Carol Henderson became my unofficial project coordinator, organizing meal trains and supply drives. Mrs. Peterson from the corner house, who'd seemed so charmed by Denise's parties, now knocked on my door weekly with homemade cookies and offers to help. I should have spoken up when I saw how she was treating you, Mrs. Peterson said one afternoon, her voice heavy with regret. I was a coward and I'm ashamed of myself. These conversations happened repeatedly as news of the shelter spread. Neighbors who'd stayed silent during Denise's campaign against me now found their voices, offering apologies and assistance. Some relationships couldn't be repaired, but others grew stronger than they'd ever been. The most meaningful support came from unexpected places. Women began reaching out, some who'd heard the story on social media, others who'd experienced similar family betrayals after losing spouses. Their stories reminded me that my experience with Denise wasn't unique, that countless women faced similar isolation when they needed support most. One letter particularly touched me. It came from a woman named Sarah in the next county. Dear Mrs. Patterson, I lost my husband last year and his family immediately tried to contest his will. They said I wasn't really family either. Reading about your situation and how you turned it into something beautiful gave me hope. I'm enclosing a donation for the shelter and a promise to volunteer when it opens. The grand opening came 6 months later on a perfect spring morning. The house looked transformed but familiar. Robert's favorite reading corner had become a quiet study space. Our old dining room was now a community kitchen where residents could share meals and stories. Local officials attended the ribbon cutting, but the ceremony felt intimate rather than political. I stood on the front porch where Denise had collapsed in tears just months earlier, now decorated with planters full of Robert's favorite flowers. This house has seen love and loss, betrayal and forgiveness, I told the small crowd gathered on the lawn. Today, it begins a new chapter as a place where women can write their own stories of recovery and hope. As the first residents moved in that afternoon, I watched from across the street. 3 women with children, 2 others starting over after difficult divorces, and an elderly lady who'd lost her home after her husband's medical bills consumed their savings. They carried their belongings up the front steps Robert had painted the summer before he died, past the garden where we'd planted tomatoes together, through the door where we'd welcomed friends for countless dinner parties. That evening I walked through my small apartment, touching the few precious items I'd kept from our life together. Robert's reading glasses on my nightstand. The photo from the church picnic with his handwritten note on the back. His coffee mug which I still used every morning. I didn't need the house to remember him. The love we'd shared wasn't contained in walls or rooms or inheritance papers. It lived in my memories, in the kindness he'd taught me, in the strength he'd always insisted I possessed. My phone buzzed with a text from Carol. The residents are having coffee together in the kitchen. They're already laughing and sharing stories. Robert would love seeing his house full of hope again. I smiled, touching the window glass where my reflection looked back. A woman who discovered her worth wasn't determined by blood relations or family acceptance, but by her own capacity to love and be loved in return. You were right, Robert, I whispered to the quiet room. I didn't need their acceptance. I just needed to accept myself. Outside my window, lights glowed in the Patterson House for Women in Transition, where new stories were beginning and old wounds were healing. The house that had once been a battlefield had become exactly what it was always meant to be, a sanctuary built on love. If this story of quiet justice had you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Laura turned Robert's house into a women's shelter, transforming pain into purpose. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more inspiring stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.
I'm Brooke Mitchell, 22 years old, and I still remember how it felt standing at that bus stop in my graduation cap and gown while my classmates drove past in their cars. The worst part wasn't the drizzling Seattle rain or the curious stares. It was the text that lit up my phone, a picture of my 19-year-old sister Amber posing beside her brand new Tesla, her graduation gift from our parents. The same parents who told me the bus was perfectly reliable transportation for my college graduation. Our family wasn't struggling financially. This was just another chapter in a lifetime of being the invisible daughter. Before I tell you how I finally stood up for myself after years of being the forgotten child, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt invisible in your own family. I grew up in Bellevue, a comfortable Seattle suburb where most families lived well, but tried not to flaunt it. My father Ryan worked as a senior software developer for a major tech company, pulling in a salary that put us firmly in the upper middle class. My mother Stephanie sold luxury real estate, driving clients around in her Mercedes to view lakefront properties. We lived in a beautiful 4-bedroom house with a view of Lake Washington. From the outside, we were the picture-perfect American family. But inside those walls, there was a clear hierarchy, and I quickly learned my place in it. My sister Amber was the golden child from the moment she was born. 3 years younger than me, she somehow commanded the room in ways I never could. She had our mother's charisma and social grace, our father's quick wit, and a kind of magnetic confidence I both envied and admired. I, on the other hand, was the responsible one. Studious, quiet, and, according to my mother, too sensitive. The pattern started early. When I was 7 and Amber was 4, I remember our parents filming every second of her preschool dance recital. 2 weeks later, they missed my school science fair, where I won first place because Amber had a cold. Mom assured me it wasn't a big deal and that there would be other science fairs. When I showed them my blue ribbon later that night, they glanced at it while helping Amber build a pillow fort in the living room. "That's nice, honey," my mother said, before turning back to Amber. "Look how creative your sister is with those cushions." By middle school, the differences became more pronounced. Amber's bedroom was redecorated 3 times to match her evolving interests. My furniture remained the same set from childhood, with my parents promising we'd update it soon for years. When I brought home straight A's, my father would nod and say, "That's what we expect from you, Brooke." When Amber managed to pull B's and C's, they'd take her out for ice cream to celebrate her improvement. The most glaring example came on our respective 16th birthdays. For mine, we had a modest dinner at my favorite local restaurant with just our immediate family. I received practical gifts, a laptop for schoolwork, some clothes, and a promise that they'd help me find a used car when the time was right. For Amber's 16th, they rented a venue, hired a DJ, and invited 60 of her closest friends. She received designer clothes, jewelry, and the crowning gift, a brand new Honda Civic with a giant red bow on top. When I pointed out the difference, my mother said, "Amber's more social, honey. She needs these things to build confidence. You've always been so independent." 2 months after Amber got her new Honda, they finally helped me buy my first car, a 10-year-old Toyota with mysterious engine noises and a passenger door that didn't open from the inside. "It has character," my father said, slapping the hood. "And it'll teach you about car maintenance." Throughout high school, the pattern continued. My parents attended every one of Amber's volleyball games, but made it to only 2 of my debate team competitions, despite my team making it to state finals. When I was accepted to the University of Washington with a partial academic scholarship, my parents seemed more interested in Amber's upcoming prom than my college plans. "Of course you got in," my mother said when I showed her my acceptance letter. "You've always been smart. Now, do you think Amber should go with the blue dress or the silver for prom? The silver really brings out her eyes." The only person who truly saw me was my grandmother Hannah. My mother's mother was a retired English professor who valued education and hard work. When my parents missed my high school graduation speech as valedictorian because Amber had a volleyball tournament in Portland, Grandma Hannah was there, front and center, beaming with pride. "They don't see what I see," she told me afterward, squeezing my hand. But someday, you'll build a life where your worth is recognized, Brooke. And it will be beautiful. I clung to those words throughout college. While Amber followed in my footsteps to the University of Washington a few years later, despite having lower grades and test scores, our college experiences couldn't have been more different. I worked 20 hours a week at the campus library to supplement my scholarship, maintained a 3.9 GPA, and lived frugally in a shared apartment with 3 other students. Amber lived in the expensive dorms freshman year, then moved to a luxury apartment complex popular with sorority girls. She joined a sorority, changed her major 3 times, and maintained what she called a solid C average. My parents paid her full tuition, rent, and gave her a generous monthly allowance. Meanwhile, I stretched every dollar and picked up extra shifts during holidays to make ends meet. Throughout all this, I told myself that someday they would see my accomplishments. Someday they would be proud of me the way they were proud of Amber. As my college graduation approached after 4 years of hard work, I thought maybe, just maybe, this would be that moment. I had secured a job interview at a prestigious marketing firm in Portland. I was graduating with honors. Surely now they would see me. I was wrong. But I didn't know just how wrong until the day I found out about Amber's Tesla. My final semester of college was a marathon of all-nighters, coffee-fueled study sessions, and balancing work with internship applications. While my classmates were enjoying senior bar crawls and spring break trips, I was pulling double shifts at the library and finalizing my capstone project. Despite the exhaustion, I maintained my 3.9 GPA and even secured a promising job interview at Horizon Marketing in Portland, all while my ancient Toyota made increasingly concerning noises whenever I drove over 40 miles per hour. 3 weeks before graduation, I called my parents to discuss logistics for the big day. I'd been dropping hints for months that my car probably wouldn't make it to graduation, especially since the ceremony was at the main campus, a good 30 minutes from my apartment. So about graduation day, I said, twisting the phone cord around my finger as I paced my tiny bedroom. I'm a bit worried about transportation. The Toyota's making that knocking sound again, and the mechanic says it might be the transmission. My father replied, clearly distracted. I could hear him typing on his keyboard in the background. Can't one of your roommates drive you? They're all participating in the ceremony too, Dad. We all need to be there early for lineup. Well, we'll figure something out, my mother chimed in from the extension. By the way, did we tell you Amber made Dean's List this semester? Her advisor says if she keeps this up, she might graduate a semester early. I bit my lip, knowing that Amber's Dean's List at the School of Communications required only a 3.2 GPA, nowhere near my consistent 3.9. Still, I congratulated them and tried once more to address my transportation concerns. About graduation, I was thinking maybe... Oh, honey, can we talk about this later? My mother interrupted. Your father and I are heading out to look at something special for Amber.
À surprise.
Call you tomorrow? They hung up before I could respond. 2 days later, I stopped by my parents' house to pick up some winter clothes I'd stored in their basement. They weren't expecting me, and as I let myself in with my key, I overheard them talking excitedly in the kitchen. Amber's going to flip when she sees it, my father was saying. The white interior is perfect. I know. And the salesman said we can have it ready by next weekend. Just in time for Brooke's graduation. Amber can drive it there and show everyone. I froze in the hallway, my heart pounding. Don't you think it's a bit much for a freshman? My father asked, though his tone suggested he'd already been convinced. A Tesla is a serious car. Ryan, she maintained AB average this year while adjusting to college and sorority life. That deserves recognition. Besides, her Honda is already 2 years old, and all her sorority sisters are getting new cars for sophomore year. I must have made a noise because they both looked up, startled to see me standing in the doorway. Brooke, we didn't hear you come in, my mother said, quickly closing the laptop they'd been looking at. I came to get my winter stuff, I said quietly. What's this about a Tesla? Before they could answer, the front door burst open and Amber bounded in, her sorority tote bag slung over one shoulder, and her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the Seattle drizzle.
Mom, Dad.
Guess what? Kylie's parents got her a Range Rover for sophomore year, and it's absolutely. She stopped short when she saw me. Oh, hey, Brooke. What are you doing here? My parents exchanged a look that confirmed everything I'd overheard. My mother recovered first, her real estate smile sliding into place. Actually, we have some exciting news, she said, putting her arm around Amber. We were going to wait, but since everyone's here, Amber, honey, in recognition of your hard work this year, and since Brooke's graduating next week. My father finished for her, beaming with pride. We're getting you a Tesla Model 3, white with the premium interior package you wanted. Amber screamed and jumped up and down while I stood there, invisible once again. Not only were they buying her a Tesla as a reward for mediocre freshman grades, but they were somehow framing it as connected to my graduation, an event that should have been about celebrating my achievements. Oh my God. Are you serious? A Tesla? Taylor's going to die. Amber threw her arms around our parents, then turned to me with a smirk. See, Brooke? Some of us get cars that actually work. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but was cut off by my mother. We're going to pick it up next Friday, and then we can all drive to Brooke's graduation in style on Saturday. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Not only was my graduation being overshadowed, but they hadn't even considered how I would get to my own ceremony. I was just expected to ride along in Amber's new Tesla, like an afterthought. I mumbled something about needing to get my clothes and fled to the basement, tears burning my eyes. As I stuffed sweaters into a duffel bag, I could hear them upstairs, excitedly discussing features and color options. That night, back in my apartment, I broke down while telling my roommate Jessica what had happened. Your parents are buying your teenage sister a Tesla while you can barely afford oil changes for your death trap? Jessica was furious on my behalf. And they didn't even think about how you're getting to graduation? That's beyond messed up, Brooke. Maybe I'm overreacting, I said, wiping my eyes. They've always been this way. That doesn't make it right, Jessica insisted. You need to stand up for yourself. Tell them how you feel. What's the point? They don't hear me. They never have. Then make them hear you, Jessica said firmly. You're graduating with honors. You've worked your ass off while Amber's been partying in a sorority house on their dime. If they can't see your worth, you need to show it to them. I nodded, but as graduation day approached, my anxiety only grew. Would I finally find the courage to speak up, or would I stay silent as I had for 22 years? The Friday before graduation dawned bright and clear, a rare gift in Seattle's typically gray spring. I woke up early to take my final exam in marketing analytics, the last hurdle before officially completing my degree. Despite the knot in my stomach that had been there since discovering Amber's Tesla surprise, I managed to focus long enough to ace the exam. Finished with flying colors, I see, Professor Wilson said as I handed in my test. Not that I'd expect anything less from you, Brooke. You've been one of my most dedicated students. I smiled, grateful for the recognition. Thank you. Your class has been invaluable. After the exam, I headed to my final shift at the campus library where I'd worked throughout college. My supervisor Thomas had arranged a small goodbye gathering with the staff, complete with a card signed by everyone and a modest cake. We're really going to miss you around here, Thomas said, handing me a gift bag that contained a beautiful leather-bound journal. 4 years without a single late arrival or missed shift. You've set the bar impossibly high for your replacement. I blinked back tears, touched by the gesture. Thank you all so much. This job has been a lifeline for me. After saying my goodbyes, I checked my phone to find 3 missed calls from my mother. I called her back as I walked to my apartment. Brooke, finally, she answered on the first ring. We're at the Tesla dealership picking up Amber's car. It's absolutely stunning. White exterior with white vegan leather interior. Premium everything. That's great, I managed, swallowing the lump in my throat. About tomorrow? Yes, that's why I'm calling, she interrupted. The ceremony starts at 1 p.m., right? We'll need to leave early to find parking. Your father thinks we should get there by 11:30 to get good seats. Mom, I said firmly, I need to be there by 10 a.m. for graduate lineup. I've been trying to talk to you about transportation all week. Oh, she paused, as if this thought hadn't occurred to her. Well, we'll be busy getting Amber's car ready for its first big drive. Can't you just take the bus? There's a direct route from your apartment to campus, isn't there? I stopped walking, stunned by her casual suggestion. You want me to take the bus to my college graduation? In my cap and gown. It's just practical, honey. Everyone else will be with us in Amber's new Tesla, and there won't be room if we need to take your grandmother too. The bus is perfectly reliable transportation. The world seemed to tilt around me. Everyone else. As if I were not part of the family. As if I were some distant acquaintance who needed to find my own way to the event. You're suggesting I ride the bus to my graduation while my younger sister drives her brand new Tesla. That you bought her for no particular milestone, to MY graduation ceremony. I couldn't keep the hurt and anger from my voice. Don't be dramatic, Brooke, my mother sighed. You've always been so independent. I thought you'd appreciate handling it yourself instead of relying on us to chauffeur you around. In the background, I could hear Amber and my father laughing about something, completely oblivious to our conversation. I have to go, I said, my voice thick with unshed tears. Amber's special day is waiting. It's the practical solution, my mother repeated, either missing or ignoring my sarcasm. We'll see you at the ceremony tomorrow. Don't forget to wear that nice dress under your gown. I hung up and stood frozen on the sidewalk, people streaming past me on their way to Friday evening activities. A mixture of emotions washed over me: shock, hurt, anger, and finally, a strange sense of clarity. This was who my parents were. This had always been who they were. No achievement of mine would ever measure up to Amber's existence. I dialed my grandmother's number with shaking hands. Grandma Hannah? It's Brooke. There's my graduate. Her warm voice instantly provided comfort. Are you ready for tomorrow? They're making me take the bus, I blurted out, tears finally spilling over. To my own graduation. Because they're busy with Amber's new Tesla. There was a long pause before my grandmother spoke, her voice unusually hard. They did what? Through broken sobs, I explained everything: the Tesla, the transportation issue, years of being overlooked and undervalued. Oh, my darling girl, Grandma Hannah said when I finished. I wish I could say I'm surprised, but I've watched this pattern for too long. Your mother did the same thing to your Aunt Carol when they were growing up. What do? I asked, feeling like a lost child despite being a college graduate. You have two choices, she said firmly. You can either continue to accept their treatment, or you can start setting boundaries. Neither is easy, but only one leads to healing. I'm so tired of being invisible, I whispered. Then stop allowing them to look past you, she replied. But whatever you decide, know that I see you, Brooke. I've always seen you. And I am so tremendously proud of the woman you've become, with or without their recognition. After talking with my grandmother, I returned to my apartment and spent the evening preparing for graduation. I carefully ironed my graduation gown, polished my dress shoes, and set out the dress my mother had insisted I wear, a sensible navy blue number that wouldn't call attention to myself. As I hung up the gown, my phone pinged with a text from my childhood friend Mia. Can't wait to see you walk tomorrow. You've worked so hard for this. Let me know if you need anything at all. I stared at the message, grateful for the people who did value me. Perhaps that was the key, focusing on those who saw me rather than lamenting those who didn't. I set my alarm for 7 a.m., determined to get through graduation with dignity, even if it meant riding the bus in my cap and gown. Tomorrow would be my day, even if my family couldn't see that. And maybe, just maybe, it would also be the day I finally found my voice. The morning of graduation, I woke before my alarm, sunlight filtering through my thin curtains. For a brief, blissful moment, I felt only excitement. I was graduating today, the culmination of 4 years of hard work and determination. Then reality crashed back as I remembered I'd be taking the bus to my own ceremony. I checked my phone to find congratulatory texts from friends and a single message from my mother. Don't forget we're meeting by the main entrance at 12:30. Amber wants to take family photos with her new car. No, congratulations. No, we're proud of you. Just logistics centered around Amber and her Tesla. I took a deep breath and got ready, carefully doing my makeup and hair before putting on the navy dress and my honors cords. As I placed the cap on my head and looked in the mirror, I felt a surge of pride despite everything. I had done this.
Me.
Not my parents' money or connections. Just my own hard work and persistence. My roommates had already left for the ceremony, each with their own families coming to pick them up. The apartment was quiet as I gathered my things, took one last look around, and headed out to the bus stop 3 blocks away. The Seattle morning was gray and misty, a light rain starting to fall as I walked. I clutched my cap to keep it from blowing away, already feeling droplets soaking into my gown. By the time I reached the bus stop, the rain had picked up and I huddled under the small shelter, trying to keep my graduation attire dry. A car honked as it drove past, and I looked up to see classmates from my marketing program waving from inside, their families driving them to the ceremony. I forced a smile and waved back, then turned away quickly, not wanting them to stop and ask why I was at a bus stop in my cap and gown. "Graduating today, dear?" a voice asked. I turned to see an elderly woman with kind eyes sitting on the bench, an umbrella clutched in her gnarled hands. "Yes," I replied, trying to sound cheerful. "University of Washington. And you're taking the bus?" She looked surprised. "My family had other transportation arrangements," I said diplomatically. The woman studied me for a moment, then patted the seat beside her.
I'm Doris.
"Sit down before you get any wetter." I sat, grateful for the company and the shelter of her large umbrella. "Let me guess," Doris said. "Family drama?" I laughed despite myself. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who's been there," she replied. "I graduated from nursing school in 1962. My parents didn't come because they were attending my brother's baseball game. I took 2 buses in my white uniform and cap." "How did you handle it?" I asked, suddenly eager for her wisdom. "Not well, at first," Doris admitted. "I was angry for years. But eventually I realized that their failure to see my worth didn't diminish it. It just showed their limitations, not mine." Before I could respond, the bus arrived, its brakes squealing as it pulled up to the curb. Doris insisted I board first, and the driver smiled as he saw my graduation attire. "Congratulations," he called out, refusing my fare. "It's on me today. Consider it a graduation gift." Inside the bus, several passengers offered similar congratulations, a woman in scrubs insisting I take her seat at the front. The kindness of these strangers brought tears to my eyes, their recognition more meaningful than they could know. As the bus rumbled toward campus, my phone vibrated with a text from Amber. "OMG, the Tesla is amazing. Mom and Dad are letting me drive everyone to your thing. So excited for everyone to see it." Attached was a picture of her posing beside the gleaming white Tesla, my parents beaming proudly behind her. I turned off my phone and slipped it into my pocket, unwilling to let it spoil this moment. The bus journey brought back memories of other times I'd been overlooked. My 16th birthday when my parents forgot to pick me up from debate practice because they were shopping for Amber's new phone. High school graduation when they arrived late and left early for Amber's dance recital. Countless achievements met with distracted acknowledgement while Amber's smallest accomplishments were celebrated lavishly. Yet amid these painful memories, I found myself thinking about Doris's words. Their failure to see my worth didn't diminish it. Perhaps it was time I truly believed that. The bus approached campus, now crowded with graduates and their families. Through the window, I could see proud parents taking photos, grandparents carrying flowers, siblings holding congratulatory signs. A lump formed in my throat, but I swallowed it down. Today was still my achievement, even if my family couldn't recognize it properly. As I prepared to exit, Doris touched my arm. "Remember, dear, family isn't always who raises you. Sometimes it's who sees you. Find those people, and keep them close. I thanked her, oddly moved by this brief encounter with a stranger who somehow understood exactly what I needed to hear. Stepping off the bus, I spotted Jessica waiting by the campus entrance, scanning the crowd. "Brooke," she called, rushing over. "I was worried you wouldn't make it. Did you really take the bus? In your gown?" "Family tradition," I said wryly, straightening my slightly damp cap. Jessica's expression darkened. "They really made you bus it while they're parading around in a brand new Tesla? That's beyond messed up." "It's fine," I said automatically, then corrected myself. "Actually, no. It's not fine. But I'm not going to let it ruin today." "That's my girl." Jessica linked her arm through mine. "And just so you know, my parents want to take us both out for dinner after the ceremony. They insist." I felt a rush of gratitude for Jessica and her family, who had always made me feel welcome. "I'd like that." As we walked toward the graduate assembly area, I felt simultaneously drained and determined. The bus ride had given me time to reflect on years of inequality and overlooked achievements, but it had also shown me the kindness of strangers and reminded me that I wasn't alone, even if my own family couldn't see me clearly. "Ready to graduate?" Jessica asked as we approached the sea of black gowns and caps. "More than ready," I replied, squaring my shoulders. "It's time." The graduate assembly area buzzed with excitement as hundreds of soon-to-be alumni adjusted their caps, straightened their honors cords, and took selfies with friends. I lined up with the other marketing majors, trying to focus on the momentous occasion rather than my family situation. "Where are your folks?" asked Tyler, a classmate I'd worked with on several group projects. "My family's been texting me nonstop trying to find the right entrance." "They're coming separately," I said vaguely, adjusting my cap. "Mine too," added Zoe, another marketing major. "My parents are divorced and insisting on sitting on opposite sides of the auditorium." Everyone laughed, sharing stories of overeager parents and family quirks. I smiled along, but remained quiet, not wanting to explain that my family was late because they were showing off my sister's new Tesla, a gift they'd given her instead of helping me get to my own graduation. Through the windows of the assembly hall, I could see families streaming toward the main auditorium. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Where should we park the Tesla? Is there special graduation parking?" I didn't bother responding. Let them figure it out themselves for once. As we lined up alphabetically for the procession, I caught sight of my family finally arriving, 20 minutes late, making a scene as they entered. Amber led the way in a tight white dress that matched her new car, my parents following behind her like attendants rather than the other way around. Several heads turned to watch their entrance, exactly the kind of attention Amber thrived on. The ceremony began with pomp and circumstance, playing as we marched into the auditorium. Despite everything, I felt a swell of emotion as I entered, the culmination of years of hard work embodied in this moment. The university president welcomed everyone, then introduced the commencement speaker, Dr. Eliza Chun, a renowned marketing executive and UW alumna. Dr. Chun approached the podium with confidence, surveying the graduates with a warm smile. "Today, I want to talk about something they don't teach in business classes, your intrinsic value," she began. I straightened in my seat, suddenly alert. Society often measures worth through external validation. The car you drive, the house you live in, the attention you receive. But true value comes from within. It's built through perseverance, integrity, and self-belief, especially when no one else is watching. Her words seemed to pierce directly through me, as if she were speaking to my exact situation. Some of you have had every advantage: financial support, family connections, endless encouragement. Others have fought for every inch of progress, often unseen and uncelebrated it. To those students especially, I say this: the fact that others failed to recognize your light doesn't make it shine any less brightly. In fact, the struggle to be seen often creates the most resilient, compassionate leaders. Tears welled in my eyes as Dr. Chun continued, her message resonating with everything I'd been feeling. Your worth is not determined by others' ability to see it. Remember that as you move forward into a world that will continue to overlook quiet excellence in favor of flashy mediocrity. The rest of her speech blurred as I processed her words. Had I been allowing my parents' perception to define my worth all these years? The revelation felt simultaneously painful and liberating. When it came time for graduates to cross the stage, I took a deep breath and prepared myself. Row by row, we stood and filed toward the stage. As my row was called, I scanned the audience, spotting my family in the middle section. My mother was on her phone, my father was checking his watch, and Amber was taking selfies. None of them were watching the stage. Brooke Mitchell, Bachelor of Science in Marketing, summa cum laude, the dean announced as I stepped onto the stage. I expected to cross in silence like many others before me. Instead, I heard a thunderous cheer from the back of the auditorium. Startled, I looked up to see my grandmother Hannah standing, despite her arthritis, applauding wildly. Beside her were Jessica's parents and several of my library coworkers, including Thomas. They held up a banner. "Congratulations, Brooke. We see you." Emotion overwhelmed me as I accepted my diploma, tears flowing freely now. These people, some related by blood, others by circumstance, had made the effort to be here fully present for me. They saw me. They celebrated me. And in that moment, it was enough. As I returned to my seat, I glanced at my family. My parents looked confused and embarrassed by the unexpected cheering section. Amber appeared annoyed that attention had been diverted from her. For once, I didn't care about their reactions. After the ceremony, graduates flooded into the courtyard to meet their families. I found my grandmother first, pulling her into a tight hug. "You came," I whispered, still in disbelief. "Your doctor said the trip would be too much with your arthritis." "Wild horses couldn't have kept me away," Grandma Hannah replied, cupping my face in her hands. "I'm so proud of you, my brilliant girl." Thomas and my other coworkers offered congratulations before tactfully withdrawing to give me time with family. Jessica's parents insisted on taking photos of me with my diploma, treating the moment with the reverence it deserved. It was in this warm bubble of genuine celebration that my parents and Amber finally found me. "There you are," my mother exclaimed, as if I'd been the one who was difficult to locate. "We've been looking everywhere. Who are all those people cheering for you?" It was a bit much, don't you think? "Those were people who wanted to celebrate with me," I said simply. "Well, we need to take family photos by Amber's new car before the parking fee increases," my father said, checking his watch again. "The Tesla is parked in the VIP section. Had to pay extra, but worth it for the statement it makes." "Seriously, Brooke, wait until you see it," Amber gushed, completely oblivious to the significance of the day. "The interior is amazing. Everyone's been stopping to look at it. Some guy even asked if I was a professional model doing a Tesla promotion." Something inside me finally snapped, quietly, definitively. For years of working myself to exhaustion. For years of maintaining near-perfect grades while working part-time. For years of watching my sister get everything handed to her while I struggled. And now, on what should have been my day, they couldn't even pretend to care about my achievement. "No," I said, the word coming out clear and firm. "No what?" my mother asked, already turning toward the parking lot. "No, I will not take family photos by Amber's Tesla on my graduation day." My father frowned. "Don't be difficult, Brooke. It's just a few pictures." "It's never just been about pictures," I said, my voice gaining strength. "It's about a lifetime of being treated as less than. It's about you buying my teenage sister a luxury car while making me take the bus to my own graduation. It's about showing up late to my ceremony because you were too busy fawning over Amber and her new toy." "That's not fair," my mother protested, looking around nervously as nearby families glanced our way. "We've always supported you. Have you?" I asked, surprising myself with my calm. "When was the last time you attended any event that mattered to me without checking your watch or leaving early for something of Amber's? When have you ever celebrated my achievements with even half the enthusiasm you show for her mediocre ones?" "I got good grades this year," Amber interjected, indignant. You got C's with a few B's at a university Dad's donations helped you get into, while living in a luxury apartment they pay for, with a monthly allowance that exceeds what I make working 20 hours a week, I replied. And for that, you got a Tesla. I graduated summa cum laude while working throughout college, and I got a bus ticket. My father's face reddened. That's completely different. Amber needs more support. You've always been independent. I had to be independent, I said quietly. You never gave me any other choice. Is that what this is about? My mother asked, her voice rising. A car? If you wanted a car, you should have said something. This isn't about the car, my grandmother interjected, stepping forward. This is about seeing your daughter, really seeing her for the first time in 22 years. My parents turned to her in surprise, as if just noticing her presence. Mom, this isn't the place. My mother began. If not now, when? Grandma Hannah interrupted. I've watched this pattern for decades. Carol was treated the same way you treat Brooke, invisible unless performing some service for the family. And now you're continuing the cycle with your own daughters. My mother paled at the mention of her sister, my Aunt Carol, who had limited contact with the family. Brooke has worked harder than anyone I know, my grandmother continued. She deserved to have her parents drive her to graduation, at minimum. She deserved celebration, recognition, and respect, not to be an afterthought to Amber's new car. A small crowd had gathered, watching the drama unfold. I felt a hand slip into mine and turned to see Jessica standing beside me in silent support. I need to go, I said, suddenly exhausted by the confrontation. My friend's family has invited me to a graduation dinner, people who actually want to celebrate with me. Brooke, you can't just walk away from your family, my father protested. Watch me, I replied, then turned to leave with Jessica, Grandma Hannah following behind us. As we walked away, I heard Amber ask in a confused voice, So, are we not taking pictures with a Tesla? And for the first time in years, I found myself laughing, genuinely laughing, at the absurdity of it all. In standing up for myself, I discovered a strength I hadn't known I possessed. Whether my family recognized my worth or not, I finally did. After the graduation ceremony, Jessica's parents took us to a lovely dinner at a waterfront restaurant. They ordered champagne, made heartfelt toasts to my achievement, and treated me like family. Grandma Hannah joined us, her eyes twinkling with pride every time she looked my way. For those few hours, I allowed myself to bask in the celebration I deserved. To Brooke, Jessica's father said, raising his glass, whose determination and brilliance will take her wherever she wants to go. And who finally found her voice today, Grandma Hannah added with a wink. By the time we finished dinner, my phone showed 12 missed calls and 23 text messages from my parents and Amber. I silenced it and slipped it back into my purse. Whatever crisis they were experiencing could wait until tomorrow. Today was mine. Jessica offered to let me stay at her parents' hotel, but I declined. I needed to face my apartment, and whatever awaited me there, on my own terms. Grandma Hannah squeezed my hand before getting into Jessica's parents' car. Remember, standing up for yourself isn't a one-time event, she said softly. It's a practice. Be gentle with yourself if you falter. I nodded, grateful for her wisdom, and took the bus back to my apartment. As we rounded the corner onto my street, I saw my parents' Mercedes parked outside my building. They were sitting inside, waiting. Taking a deep breath, I got off the bus and approached their car. My mother spotted me first, nudging my father, who had been dozing in the passenger seat. They scrambled out, both looking uncharacteristically disheveled. Brooke. My mother rushed toward me. We've been calling for hours. Where have you been? At my graduation dinner, I replied calmly, with people who wanted to celebrate with me. We need to talk, my father said, his authoritative tone returning. This scene you caused today was completely inappropriate. Let's go inside, I suggested, not wanting to have this conversation on the street. My roommates are gone for the weekend. Once in my apartment, my parents took in the modest surroundings with poorly concealed dismay. My father paced the small living room while my mother perched uncomfortably on our second-hand couch. Brooke, my father began, I understand you were upset about transportation arrangements today, but publicly embarrassing your family was unacceptable. Is that what you think happened? I asked. That I was throwing a tantrum over a ride? What else could it be? My mother threw up her hands. We've given you everything. We paid for your education. I had a scholarship, I interrupted, and worked 20 hours a week to cover living expenses. We would have helped if you'd asked, my father countered. You've always been so independent, so capable. Amber needs more support. No, I said firmly. Amber gets more support. There's a difference. That's ridiculous, my mother scoffed. We've always treated you both fairly. Really? I walked to my bedroom and returned with a shoebox. Let me show you something. I opened the box and began laying out items on the coffee table. A birthday card from when I turned 16 with a $50 gift card inside. Next to it, a photo of Amber's 16th birthday showing her with her new Honda. My high school graduation announcement alongside a bank statement showing the $200 my parents deposited as a gift, a newspaper clipping of Amber's volleyball team with my parents prominently featured in the stands, my college acceptance letter with no congratulatory note, and finally, a bus ticket from earlier that day. This is a record of inequality, I said quietly. Not in one dramatic moment, but in 1,000 small ones over many years. My parents stared at the items, momentarily speechless. You've kept all this? My mother finally asked, her voice small. Not to throw it in your faces someday, I explained, but to remind myself that I wasn't imagining things, that the difference in how you treated us was real. Before they could respond, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Grandma Hannah, who must have taken a taxi from her hotel. I thought you might need reinforcements, she said, stepping inside. Her eyes narrowed when she saw my parents. I see the conversation has started. Mom, this isn't your business, my mother began. When my granddaughter takes a bus to her college graduation while you parade around with Amber in a brand new Tesla, it becomes my business, Grandma Hannah replied sharply. Stephanie, you're repeating exactly what your father did to you and Carol. My mother flinched at the comparison. That's completely different. Is it? Grandma Hannah asked. Your father favored you because you were outgoing and charming like him. You favor Amber for the same reason. Carol was studious and quiet, like Brooke. You resented how your father treated Carol, yet here you are, doing the same thing to your own daughter. A heavy silence fell over the room. My father, who had been defensive throughout, finally spoke. Brooke has always seemed fine, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. She never complained. She shouldn't have to complain to be treated equally, Grandma Hannah pointed out. I thought. My mother began, then stopped, staring at the items on the table. I thought because you were successful on your own, you didn't need as much from us. I thought we were giving you space to be independent. I needed parents, I said simply, not space. My father ran his hand through his hair, looking genuinely troubled for the first time. The Tesla was excessive, wasn't it? Even for Amber. It's not just about the Tesla, I said. Though making me take the bus to graduation while buying her a luxury car certainly brought everything into focus. What do you want from us now? My mother asked, and I was surprised to see tears in her eyes. How do we fix this? I don't know if you can fix 22 years of inequality overnight, I admitted. But acknowledging it is a start, and understanding that going forward, our relationship will have boundaries. Boundaries? My father looked alarmed. What does that mean? It means I won't accept being treated as less than Amber anymore. It means I'll call out favoritism when I see it. And it means I might need distance sometimes to protect myself. My parents exchanged worried glances. This was new territory for all of us. I've accepted a job interview in Portland next week, I continued. If I get it, I'll be moving. Not to punish you, but because I need a fresh start. Portland? My mother repeated. But that's 3 hours away. 3 hours is nothing if you actually want to visit, I pointed out. And there are these amazing inventions called phones that work across state lines. My father almost smiled at that. You've really thought this through. I've had years to think about it, I replied. I just never had the courage to say it out loud. We talked for another hour, moving through decades of hurt and misunderstanding. There were no perfect resolutions, no tearful group hugs like in the movies. My parents didn't suddenly transform into the perfectly supportive mother and father I'd always wanted. But there was something new in the way they listened, really listened, perhaps for the first time. As they prepared to leave, my mother hesitated at the door. "I never meant to make you feel less loved," she said softly. I think I saw too much of myself in Amber and too much of Carol in you. And I projected all my complicated feelings onto that. I know you didn't do it maliciously, I acknowledged. But impact matters more than intent. After they left, Grandma Hannah stayed a while longer, helping me process the conversation. "Do you think anything will change?" I asked her. "People can change," she said thoughtfully. "But it takes time and consistent effort. Don't expect miracles, but don't close the door on progress either." As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text. To my surprise, it was from Amber. "Can we talk? Just us." 20 minutes later, Amber arrived at my apartment, looking uncharacteristically subdued without our parents as an audience. I heard everything, she admitted, sitting across from me at my small kitchen table. I was waiting in the car, but then I followed Mom and Dad up. I stood in the hallway listening. And I prompted when she fell silent. "And I never realized," she said, picking at her perfectly manicured nails. "I knew I got more stuff, but I don't know what I thought. That you didn't care about material things? That you were above it all somehow?" "I'm not above wanting to be valued," I said quietly. Amber nodded, looking genuinely troubled. "I've been pretty awful, haven't I?" "You were a kid responding to the dynamic our parents created," I said, surprising myself with the generosity of the statement. "We both were." "Still," she bit her lip, "I'm sorry, Brooke." And she hesitated. "I told Dad I don't want the Tesla. It feels gross now." I raised an eyebrow, genuinely shocked. "Really? Don't look so surprised," she said with a hint of her usual attitude. "I can occasionally do the right thing." We talked for another hour, awkwardly at first, then with increasing honesty. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation, too much water under that bridge, but it felt like the beginning of a different kind of relationship. One based on who we actually were, not the roles we'd been assigned in our family drama. As Amber was leaving, she turned back with unexpected vulnerability in her eyes. "Hey, if you get that job in Portland, maybe I could visit sometime? See what your life is like there." "I'd like that," I said, and meant it. Later that night, as I sat alone in my quiet apartment, my phone rang. It was Thomas from the library. "Sorry to call so late," he said. "But I just heard from my friend at Horizon Marketing in Portland. They want to interview you next week. And Brooke? They're really excited about your application." I smiled, feeling a sense of possibility opening before me. So am I, Thomas. So am I. 1 month after graduation, I stood in my nearly empty apartment surrounded by boxes. The Portland job offer had come through, a junior marketing position at Horizon with potential for growth. The salary wasn't extraordinary, but it was enough for a modest studio apartment and a fresh start. More importantly, it was something I had earned entirely on my own merit. Jessica sat cross-legged on the floor, helping me sort through the last of my belongings. "I still can't believe you're really leaving," she said, carefully wrapping a framed photo of us from freshman year. "I can hardly believe it myself," I admitted. "But it feels right." The months since graduation had brought unexpected changes in my family dynamic. There had been no dramatic transformation. My parents hadn't suddenly become perfectly attuned to my needs, but there were small shifts that suggested they were at least trying. The previous weekend, my father had asked me to lunch, just the two of us, something that had never happened before. We sat across from each other at a local cafe, initially awkward without Amber or my mother to fill the silence. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," he finally offered, stirring his coffee unnecessarily. "About always feeling overlooked." I waited, giving him space to continue. "I think," he said slowly, "I assumed that because you were so capable, You didn't need as much from me. I focused on Amber because she seemed to need more guidance, more attention. He looked up, meeting my eyes. But that wasn't fair to you. No, I agreed. It wasn't. I can't change the past, he continued. But I want you to know that I see how hard you've worked, how much you've accomplished on your own. And I'm sorry I wasn't there for more of it. It wasn't everything, but it was something, an acknowledgement I'd been waiting years to hear. I'd like to help with your moving expenses, he added. Not because you need it, but because I want to support this new chapter. Initially, I wanted to refuse, to prove I could do it entirely on my own. But I realized that accepting help didn't diminish my independence. Sometimes support was just support. Thank you, I said. I'd appreciate that. My mother's attempts at connection were more awkward, but equally sincere. She'd invited me for coffee the day after my lunch with Dad, clearly having coordinated their efforts. Portland has some beautiful neighborhoods, she said, having researched the city extensively. The Pearl District is supposed to be very trendy for young professionals. It's also very expensive, I pointed out. I'll be in a smaller neighborhood across the river. She nodded, absorbing this information. You know, I've never lived more than 10 miles from where I grew up, she said unexpectedly. Sometimes I wonder what it would have been like to start fresh somewhere new. I saw something in her eyes then, a hint of envy, perhaps, or regret. It occurred to me that my mother's favoring of Amber might have been about more than just preferring her personality. Perhaps she saw in Amber the confident, popular girl she had been, and in me, the road not taken, the serious, ambitious path she might have chosen. It's not too late, I suggested, to try new things. She smiled sadly. Some roads close behind you, but I'm proud that you're taking yours. The word proud hung between us, unfamiliar but welcome. Even Amber had shown surprising growth. True to her word, she had refused the Tesla, asking our parents to return it. Instead, she kept her Honda and suggested they donate the difference to a scholarship fund. Whether this change would last remained to be seen, but it felt like a significant step. A knock at the door pulled me from my reflections. Jessica opened it to reveal my parents and Amber come to help with the final moving preparations. We brought lunch, my mother announced, holding up bags from my favorite sandwich shop. And packing tape. Your father read online that you always need more tape than you think. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity, boxing final items, loading my father's SUV, and cleaning the apartment. The dynamic between us was still finding its footing, conversations sometimes stalling into awkward silences, but the effort on all sides was tangible. As we prepared to caravan to Portland, my parents driving the loaded SUV while I followed in my newly reliable used car, a graduation gift from Grandma Hannah, Amber pulled me aside. I found this, she said, handing me a small box. It was in the storage closet at home. Inside was a faded blue ribbon, my first place award from the science fair all those years ago, the one my parents had missed. I don't know why I kept it, Amber admitted. Maybe even then I knew it mattered. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and saw something new. Not the golden child who had everything handed to her, but a young woman beginning to recognize her role in our family's complicated dynamic. Thank you, I said simply, tucking the ribbon into my purse. The drive to Portland marked both an ending and a beginning. As Seattle faded in my rearview mirror, I felt a weight lifting, not the complete resolution of 22 years of family history, but the liberation of having finally spoken my truth. My new apartment was tiny but mine, a clean slate in a city where no one knew me as Amber's sister or the responsible one. As my parents helped carry boxes up 3 flights of stairs, I watched them taking in the modest space with new eyes, not judging, but seeing my choice as valid on its own terms. After everything was unloaded, we stood awkwardly in the small living area, the moment of departure hanging between us. Well, my father said, jingling his car keys. I guess we should hit the road if we want to make it back before dark. Thank you, I said, for helping with the move. Of course, my mother replied. That's what family does. The phrase struck me as both ironic and hopeful, a statement of what should have been all along, and perhaps what could be going forward. As they prepared to leave, my mother hesitated, then pulled me into a hug tighter and longer than any I could remember. "I'm so proud of you, Brooke," she whispered. I should have said that more often. After they left, I stood alone in my new apartment, surrounded by boxes yet to be unpacked and a future yet to be written. The journey from invisibility to empowerment wasn't complete. Such transformations never are, but I had taken the crucial first step of recognizing my own worth, regardless of whether others could see it. My phone pinged with a text from Grandma Hannah. "How does it feel to be exactly where you're meant to be?" I smiled, looking out the window at my new city stretching before me. "Like the beginning of something important," I typed back. The bus ride to graduation had been painful, but perhaps necessary, the final indignity that pushed me to claim my voice and my value. In the end, the greatest graduation gift wasn't a car, or even recognition from my parents. It was the discovery that I could stand in my own light, create my own celebrations, and build a life that honored my worth, whether others recognized it or not. As I unpacked my first box, I came across the journal Thomas and my library coworkers had given me, opening it to find a quote they had inscribed on the first page. "Your worth is not determined by others' ability to see it." I ran my fingers over the words, thinking of Dr. Chen's commencement speech, Doris on the bus, Grandma Hannah's unwavering support, and all the people who had seen me clearly when my own family couldn't. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself when it felt like no one else would? Or found yourself taking the bus while someone else got the Tesla? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more real-life stories, and share with someone who might need a reminder of their own worth. Remember, sometimes the most important journeys start with a single bus ride or a single moment of standing in your truth. Thank you for listening, and until next time, keep shining your light, even when others don't see it.